Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and I see every year as a time for learning and personal development. That's one of the best parts of being involved in the property markets. I'm also learning from the markets because they're so dynamic and you never quite solve the problem because the puzzle's always getting reshuffled in front of you right when you think you've got it solved. And I'm learning from my clients, both the successful ones and the not so successful ones. And I'm learning from my professional colleagues and my mentors, and learning from my own successes and failures. Having now invested for over 40 years, I'd like to share with you a number of lessons that I've learned. The first lesson is don't let emotions drive your investment decisions. Market sentiment's a key driver of the property cycle, and one of the reasons the markets overreact, overshooting during the booms and getting too depressed during the slumps. So an important lesson is never to get carried away when the market's booming or too disenchanted during property slumps, because letting your emotions drive your investments is a surefire way of disaster, because you tend to be too optimistic at a time when you should probably be most cautious near the peak of the cycle, or a bit down when the media is full of the doom and gloom, when there's probably the least downside near the bottom of the cycle. Remember that each market downturn sets the way for the next upside, just like each boom sets the scene for the next downturn. The next lesson is take a long-term perspective. The property markets move in cycles, and even though there are a few flat years every decade or so, and times when property prices fall, the value of well-located real estate, investment-grade real estate, goes up and doubles every 8 to 10 years. Imagine if you could buy the house your parents bought at the price they paid 30 or 40 years ago. How many properties would you have bought then, knowing what they'd be worth today? The next lesson is that property investment's a game of finance rather than real estate, and that's never been truer than in the last few years, as we've experienced a credit squeeze as banks' financing restrictions have occurred because APRA has gotten involved. Put simply, if you can't get more finance, you can't buy more properties. Yet smart investors use an investment-savvy finance broker to help them through the maze of the different lenders, the different banks, and they only buy investment-grade properties to ensure that they're optimally using their equity. The next lesson is that there's not one property market. While many people generalise about the property market, there are many sub-markets around Australia. Each state is at a different stage of its own property cycle, and then within each state there are segments by geography, by price point and by type of property. For example, the top end of the market will perform very differently to the new home buyer segment, or the investor segment, or the median priced established property segment. And it's likely that both Sydney and Melbourne property markets are again going to outperform in 2017, driven by their strong economies, job growth and population growth. The next lesson is that not all properties are investment grade. While there are currently about 250,000 properties for sale in Australia, in my mind less than 2% of those on the market are investment grade. Of course, any property can be an investment. Just move the landlord out, put a tenant in, and you've got an investment. But that doesn't make it investment grade. On the other hand, investment grade properties appeal to a wide range of affluent owner-occupiers. They've got a level of scarcity. They're in the right location, one with strong prospects of long-term capital growth. They've got street appeal, they offer security, and they have a high land to asset ratio. Now this is different from a big block of land. I'd rather own a small, maybe a sixth of a block of land under an apartment building in the inner suburbs of a good capital city rather than a big block of land in regional Australia. And the last factor is that many investment grade properties have the potential to add value through renovations. My next lesson to you would be to follow a system. Look, let's be honest, almost anyone could make money during the property boom stage of the cycle because the market covers up most mistakes. But when the market turned, like at the end of the mining boom, like during the global financial crisis, those investors without a system found themselves in trouble. Remember, Warren Buffett succinctly said, you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. In other words, you need a system that is going to work through all market conditions, work when the market changes. Strategic investors follow a system. It takes the emotion out. They don't speculate. This gives them consistent profits and reduces their risk. So I suggest you make your investment boring so the rest of your life can be exciting. Understand that getting rich quick doesn't work. Residential real estate is a long-term investment, yet some investors chase fast money. They're often influenced by the latest get-rich-quick artist. You know, they've got a great story about how you join them and they can become stupendously wealthy. They often pander to the wishes of people who'd like to give up their day job to get involved in property. But in reality, most people take many years to accumulate sufficient assets to do this. Patience is an investment virtue. Warren Buffett said, wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. The next lesson is beware of all the doomsayers, because they'll be out again, and the media uses fear to grab your attention, particularly from overseas gurus who say that the value of our properties are going to plummet. I know that some people missed out on the opportunity to develop financial independence because they listened to these messages. But over the 43 years I've been involved in property, well-located properties just kept doubling in value every 10 years or so and made millionaires out of ordinary Australians. I'd like you to treat your investments like a business. The successful investors I know have grown a substantial asset base by treating their investments like a business. They do this by surrounding themselves with a great team of advisors. They get the right finance structures set up. They set up the correct ownership structures, asset protection structures, and they know how to legally use the taxation system to their advantage. The 10th lesson is there's always going to be a reason not to invest. Every year brings its own set of crises and lots of reasons not to invest. You can go back as far in history as you like. There's never been a year without crises. Sure, some years are worse than others, but there's always bad news, and much of it unexpected. Where investors get into trouble is that rather than focusing on their long-term goals, they see these crises as once-in-a-generation events that are going to change the course of history, when in fact they're the normal path of history. There's a nearly insurmountable amount of material to learn about in the fields of property, finance and economics. The big lesson is that I know so much less than I think I know. The markets will humble you if you don't check your ego at the door. Always continue learning. And the last lesson I'd like to share with you is the person who mistakes money for wealth will mistake a life of owning for a life of living. I often say that any problem that money can solve isn't really a problem. While this means that money will make your life a lot easier, to a certain degree, if you let money own you, it'll make you miserable. I became a lot happier, 25 years or so ago, when I realised that money isn't true wealth. And boy did I learn the hard way. True wealth is what you're left with when they take all your money and your properties away. It's your health, your family, your friends, your knowledge, your mindset, your spirituality and your ability to contribute to society. Well, these are my 12 lessons. Please let me know what you learned about property over the years in the comments below. And here's hoping we learn a lot together over this coming year. The more I learn, the more I seem to know. Maybe next year I'll have 13 things on this list for you.